and you have been a wonderful faculty teacher. You were there in the sessions, and students miss you a lot after that. So I think this is a perfect place where the students now can interact with you. So while I was going through the topic, which is very, very interesting, I read one quote in the morning, and I think that I should start my before I introduce Professor Catherine to everybody, to all participants. I think I should read that quote for everybody. This will help in setting the context. I read it somewhere. One of the most effective ways to learn about yourself is by taking seriously the cultures of others. It forces you to pay attention to those details of life which differentiate you from them and them from you. And I really, really like this statement very much. And I thought that this statement can be a driving force for today's session. Now I'll present the speaker to all of you, dear ladies and gentlemen. Professor Catherine has been an educator of international students for over 20 years. She has been working in a number of institutions within the home country, her own home country, Canada, as well as overseas. She spent almost 16 years in Middle East. She lived there, she worked there. Currently, Professor Catherine holds the title of Internationalization Lead with the International Education and Development Department at Georgian College, Canada, where she works on building international education partnerships and initiatives. She facilitates the faculty and students' mobility and is a certified practitioner of intercultural intelligence training. Professor Catherine holds a Master of Education and is passionate about quality student experience, global citizenship, and working on initiatives which have a positive global impact. We welcome Professor Catherine, and we are very sure that this session is going to be full of energy, full of learning, full of experiences for both, for the presenter and for the attendees. So without taking much of time, and I don't want to stand between a speaker, a resource person, an expert, and my students, those who are participating, and the faculty, those who are eager to hear Professor Catherine. Professor Catherine, over to you. Entire session is yours.
Thank you so much for such a wonderful welcome, Dr. Sharma, and good morning from Canada. I know it's evening time there in India. I'd like to welcome everyone to this session and to thank you for being here with me today. Dr. Sharma, your quote is like an absolutely perfect quote for what we're going to be talking about in this session today. So thank you for that as well. As Dr. Sharma said, I work in the International Education and Development Department here at Georgian in Canada. And I have had the honor of visiting your beautiful university twice during Global Week 2018 and 2019. So I recognize a few names popping up on the screen for students who are joining the session. So it's just really wonderful to reconnect with Chitkara and the students there in this online way that we have now while we all stay at home to keep our communities safe. In any case, I'm really happy to be here today to present on the topic of intercultural communication management, which is related to cultural competency training that I do at Georgian College. So we've got 45 minutes for the presentation. So if it's okay to hold questions until the end and we'll have a Q&A session, then that would be perfect. So the aim of today's session on intercultural communication management is to highlight a few ways that we can understand cultural differences so that we can move from merely surviving to actually thriving in the culturally complex world that we all live in. I'm going to be using a framework called the 3 colors of worldview to highlight the differences in cultures, and this is an intercultural intelligence tool developed by an organization called KnowledgeWorks, and you'll see their logo at the bottom of the slides in the presentation. This is a tool that has been used in over 70 countries on every continent on the planet as a tool for business and organizations to increase and enhance their cross-cultural communication skills and understanding. And so I hope that you will find it a useful tool that is as illuminating as I find it. So in today's session, hopefully, we can only touch on the surface. It's such a huge topic, but by the end of today's session, I hope that everybody will be able to define intercultural intelligence, describe the 3 colors of worldview, and to understand the benefits of building intercultural intelligence as a tool in business interactions to try to reduce those invisible barriers in our intercultural and global business interactions. I'm going to be using the KnowledgeWorks framework called the 3 colors of worldview. But I need to say first that this actually is only one way of approaching cultural learning, and it's certainly not the only way, but I really like it because it's easy to remember, it gives a lot of insights into the cultural drivers, and it's got very practical application. So this framework talks about 3 different colors of worldviews, which represent the 3 main cultures. And these worldviews are formed by the basic beliefs and assumptions that underlie behavior and culture. So we can visualize these as the cultural lenses that we wear. Everybody has cultural lenses that we use to take in the world and make sense of it. And we also make decisions on how to act through the filter of these lenses. So the worldviews are the cultural drivers that influence how we speak, how we act, and are really the root of why we do what we do. So another thing is that we can understand these better when we separate them out to talk about them, but it's really important to understand that all 3 worldviews are always present in all of us and in every culture. So everybody's a mix, and every culture is a mix or a blend of these worldviews. It's just that usually one is more dominant than the other ones. And the last thing to remember is it's important to say that there is no one preferred worldview. We all kind of identify with one more than another, but it doesn't mean that that's better, or universal, and that we're just going to try to remember that all of the worldviews are important to understand to increase intercultural intelligence. All right, so moving on, what are these worldviews? Well, there are 3 pairs of core primary drivers, which are opposites, that drive our interpretations and responses to the world around us, and are the motivators underlying our actions and behaviors. So let's have a look at what they are. So the first pair is called innocence guilt, and I'm going to use IG for short. The second pair is called honor shame, HS for short, and the last one is the power fear worldview, which we'll call PF for short. We'll talk about the details of what these mean. And as we talk about these worldviews, I want you to try, as you listen, to think about what characteristics of the worldviews that you identify with. And the reason I'm asking you to do that is because that's the foundation of intercultural intelligence, as Dr. Sharma kind of referred to in the quote this morning, is to understand our own cultural drivers. And I'd also like you to think about, as we talk about these worldviews, other people that you may have encountered that you noticed different kinds of behaviors that maybe you didn't understand fully, and try to recognize cultural lenses of other people. That's also a foundational part. The second step is to understand the person in front of you and their culture. So as I said, we can really only touch the surface today. So we're going to look broadly at each worldview and what they mean to understand our own cultural drivers and the cultural drivers of others. So let's start with the innocence guilt worldview, IG. I always start with IG because I'm from Canada and I was born and raised in a culture that has a largely IG kind of orientation. So I really can only claim any kind of personal expertise on this worldview. Anyway, we can see that the symbol for the IG worldview is the scales of justice. And that's because the primary driver for this worldview is to maintain innocence and avoid guilt. So what does this mean? Well, it really was the Romans who established and spread the IG worldview. They had conquered vast territory, and there was so many different cultures in their empire that they couldn't manage all these different kind of cultures. So they decided that they wanted to establish one universal set of rules that applied to everyone, regardless of their beliefs and their culture. And everyone would have to follow the same set of rules, and basically this sort of started a law and order society, and this started to take hold, especially in Western Europe, and that was brought into the North Americas. So the IG worldview is primarily built on a legal system where right and wrong actions are established by law. And so the idea is that by having predetermined documented laws, you have a standard for establishing innocence and guilt. So as a result, innocence guilt societies have a very strong legal systems where everything is documented to establish guilt or innocence, and you are either innocent for your right conduct or guilty for wrongdoing. So law and jurisprudence establish innocence and guilt, and the consequences for breaking the rules are also known, and they are supposed to be applied equally. So in addition, if predetermined standards are there for all, each individual is therefore responsible for their own behavior, including doing what's right even when nobody's looking. So following these rules to maintain your innocence and avoid personal guilt serves as the moral compass in this worldview, and also because you're individually responsible for maintaining your own innocence. If you break a rule, really it is a reflection only on you as an individual and not on your group. Okay, so moving on, we already know that the IG worldview is primarily built on a legal system where right and wrong actions are established by law. So in a society with IG as a primary driver, being right is extremely important. It's the most important thing to IG people. And the belief is that to be fair, rules must be applied rigidly and equally to everyone, no matter who you are. So IG cultures believe that justice in this is establishing right and wrong and applying it in the same way. So in this way, they think that it's fair, consistent, and transparent. IG societies therefore establish these elaborate legal systems, and one of the things about this that operating in the business world is that written contracts are of paramount importance. So agreements are extremely detailed and explicit, and it is the written contract that actually builds and ensures the trust between the parties, and the legal document that binds the agreement. And we'll see that this is different in other cultures. So other kinds of legalistic type of procedures are they want to be fair and transparent and consistent. Things like selection criteria for hiring or for awarding contracts. They've developed these sort of impartial, impersonal processes where they might use objective criteria, point systems to award the contracts and whatnot. So they want to take the personal out of the decision-making process that way. Okay, in IG cultures, they tend to be very individualistic. This idea of personal responsibility for maintaining innocence is part of a mindset of individual freedom of choice. And people are raised to be self-reliant and independent. Kids are taught to express themselves and to demonstrate individual creativity. People are expected to take individual initiative, and individual performance and achievement are highly valued. So this belief in the freedom of the individual and individual rights takes precedent over the group. It takes precedence over things like duty to family, clan, ethnic group, or nation. So the focus really is on the individual. And also the individualistic nature of the IG worldview results in a very direct transactional communication style. So directness is valued, expected, and necessary. The goal of language is to exchange information. And the messages have to be clearly expressed, spelled out, explicit. Words are the primary means of communication, and it is the speaker's obligation to make sure that the message is clearly understood and not open to interpretation. In addition, people are expected to express opinions and confront difficult issues, engage in conflict even when necessary. So the direct communication mode is to confront things head on. And as you can see on the slide here, the golden rules are honesty is the best policy, and say what you mean and mean what you say. And this is a major misunderstanding, as people from IG cultures can really be blunt and borderline rude in the view of other cultures. Again, because IG people value individual performance, they tend to define themselves on what they do and not really focusing on who they are. You'll notice that when introductions are done, it's name and then talk about what you do, and that's what people are interested in hearing about you. Due to the individual achievement orientation of IG cultures, people tend to want to get straight to business first, and relationships will follow. So establishing a good rapport or building a relationship is not a prerequisite for getting down to business. Okay. So, as we know, equality and autonomy are an important concept in IG cultures. So this applies to leadership skills as well. Individualistic cultures prefer the so-called flat management style, where leaders consult their subordinates in the decision-making process, and subordinates are expected to be self-directed and also have the freedom to challenge those who are in power. Even those who don't have a title or position are granted the freedom to take individual initiatives and are rewarded for doing so. So with this value on equality and flat management, much less attention is paid to titles. It's quite informal. Titles are usually not brought up unless it's a matter of proving your competence in something. And status differences are not conspicuous and are in fact downplayed in an effort to appear egalitarian. Also, individualistic cultures are usually more future-oriented and risk-tolerant. There's a focus more on what can we do that's new and innovative, and there's a higher risk tolerance for quick decision-making. People are more comfortable with that. So let's move on to the next worldview, the honor-shame worldview, and we'll start to notice some differences. Societies that have a predominantly honor-shame worldview are significantly different in their orientations than IG people, and we'll start seeing potentials for miscommunication and misunderstanding as we go through the points. In the picture on the slide, you can see that the symbol for the honor-shame culture is the knighthood. Because European knights, Japanese samurai, Bedouin warriors, these are all groups that embody the code of honor, which represents the main driver for the honor-shame worldview. And that is that dedicating yourself to a cause greater than yourself to bring honor to your group is the most important thing. So in honor-shame cultures, preserving and enhancing honor and avoiding shame are the most important things. They take precedence over the individual. So firstly, as we just heard, honor-shame cultures are relationship-driven, and loyalty to the group is the most important thing. It's all about loyalty to the group. Whereas IG cultures cultivate individuality, honor-shame cultures emphasize harmony, solidarity, and loyalty amongst group members. So instead of learning to express themselves as individuals, honor-shame cultures guide kids to be raised to imitate excellence as demonstrated by their masters and teachers, and to act cooperatively in groups to set and meet group goals. So this difference between individual and group orientation is the fundamental difference, and all of the other dimensions of culture kind of fall from these two differences. So people are determined by group affiliation instead of individual achievement, and group cohesion and stability are highly valued as a result of that. So belief in group harmony is of utmost importance, and loyalty to family, clan, nation, ethnic group are very important. So your honor is linked to your group, and your group's honor is linked to you, so it is very important to make honorable choices. In an IG society, impartial and impersonal selection processes are considered fair, as we saw with the objective criteria, but in group-oriented culture, it is the personal selection criteria that may play a large role. So family connections, group affiliation, etc. are considered the fair and important criteria when considering hiring processes or awarding contracts. So honor-shame cultures teach children to make honorable choices according to the situations that they find themselves in. Rules in honor-shame cultures are therefore much more flexible and fluid. We saw in the IG cultures that rules are fixed and rigid, but in honor-shame cultures, they change according to the context and especially who is involved in the situation. So in IG cultures, there are transparent consequences for breaking rules. But in honor-shame cultures, when somebody breaks the rules, it's usually the group, not the authorities, who deliver the consequences. So honor-shame cultures have more community accountability, and this depends on the relationships of the people involved. This is a really big difference between the two cultures. In an honor-shame culture, rules are much more flexible and fluid, and the idea in IG cultures is that, to be fair, they have to be applied equally, but in honor-shame cultures, to be fair, rules need to be more flexible, depending on the context and the relationships, and based on group preference. So justice in honor-shame cultures is treating each individual case based on its own circumstances. This is another profound difference, and IG cultures, with their focus on right-wrong thinking, often find it difficult to understand this aspect of honor-shame cultures. So because of the difference, because of the importance of group harmony, the communication style in honor-shame cultures is indirect. People discreetly avoid difficult or contentious issues in order to maintain the harmony and avoid any kind of conflict. So expressing opinions is done much more diplomatically, so that the people avoid offending anyone, and concerns are expressed very tactfully. Criticism is delicate because the person and the criticism can't be separated. So criticism is done with the honor of the person in mind. Every word is considered carefully, and expressions of respect and courtesy are very important in this communication style. So indirect communication style cultures are often referred to as high context cultures. Instead of the onus being on the speaker to be clear, in this communication style, it is up to the listener to interpret the meaning of the message. So often what is not said is more important than what is said. So silence carries a lot of meaning, and people look to the context in order to understand the meaning. So there's much more implicit communication or reading between the lines in order to understand meanings in this kind of culture. So non-verbal cues and the context are key in this communication style. And since maintaining harmony is such an important thing, this becomes the goal of the communication, is this group harmony. And so one of the things that IG people find hard to get used to is that what one feels and what one says may not necessarily be the same thing. So direct confrontation is avoided. So sometimes when people mean no, they will give a kind of non-binding form of yes in order to avoid this disagreement. And in contrast to the honesty is the best policy kind of mentality in IG societies, in an honor-shame worldview, if the truth hurts, it shouldn't be stated openly. It should even be evaded. So the concept of face honoring is much more important. It takes precedence over telling the truth. So as far as communicative styles of different cultures go, the direct versus indirect style is one of the major differences that can often cause misunderstanding and miscommunication. So we know that IG cultures trust detailed written agreements, but in honor-shame cultures, it is often the verbal agreement that is more important. So verbal agreements are a little bit different as well, because they're more open and general, they are flexible, and they are open to change. and they are bound up in the identities of the parties involved. So it is not the legal document that ensures trust, it is the relationship between the people that builds and ensures the trust. So with the emphasis on relationship, it follows that honor-shame societies want to establish a comfortable relationship and a sense of mutual trust. This is mandatory before any discussion of business can occur. So in honor-shame context, a great deal of effort is put into the front end of getting to know the people in the situation before they get down to business. And this is a prerequisite for doing business. And in this way, we can see how there could be potential clashes as well. In fact, there's many stories of when I lived in Dubai, very much along these lines, where people from IG cultures would come, and Dubai is a largely honor-shame worldview kind of culture. And, there would be these people coming in and wanting, roll up, hi, I'm so-and-so, wanting to roll up their sleeves and get down to business right away. And the local guys in the UAE would be like, hello, we don't even know each other yet. So even down the line, if everything went well and they got to know each other and started discussing business, the innocence guilt people would walk in with their written contracts, and the honor shame people would be going like, hello, we have a verbal agreement, don't you, this is a dishonoring situation to think that is not something that you take as an agreement, and that you need this legal document behind it. So we saw many a business deal fall through just from this one kind of misunderstanding there. Another contrast to the innocence guilt way of thinking, where they think, you are what you do, is in honor shame cultures, who you are is more important than what you do. So people care about your interests, your family connections, and cultivating a personal relationship. Importantly, for business people, leadership style expectations can be very different as well. So in honor shame cultures, subordinates expect and take direction from those above, and leaders are expected to exercise authority and take control and make decisions. So in fact, if in like IG cultures that leaders start consulting subordinates, it can even be viewed as weakness and incompetence to the subordinates. And so subordinates don't challenge those in power in order to show respect and to maintain that group harmony. And of course, in a more hierarchical culture, titles and positions are very important for the status that they carry. So privilege and status symbols are regarded as appropriate in honor shame cultures. One story that illustrates the difference in the IG culture and the honor shame culture in this kind of attitude is, it goes that, people are watching their boss driving away in a brand new Mercedes-Benz, and the IG people look at him and say, oh, look at the boss showing off his new shiny new Benz while we stand here and wait for the bus. And the honor shame people say, oh, look at the boss, he's got a new car, you can see how well things are going for our company. So this is another big difference to be aware of between the two worldviews. The last couple of things that I talked about with the IG culture related to business are the risk tolerances. So honor shame cultures sort of come from a lot more tradition, so they tend to be a little bit more cautious and less tolerant of risk because they are a little bit more past oriented. And they look at past precedents to see what worked and what didn't. And also, the honor of the group and the person are connected to this risk tolerance. The failure could reflect badly on everybody in the group. So there's a little bit more caution involved and sticking to proven methods. Not to say that change doesn't happen. It does. It just might happen at a slower pace. So this is another point to note in business interactions. And of course, all of these dimensions of culture are not just attached to honor, shame, or innocence, guilt. That, as I said at the beginning, we're all a blend of these things. So, you might have an honor, shame mainly honor, shame worldview person who's wildly risk-taking. So it's not just, they don't just stick within one set of dimensions, but people are blending and mixing it up. So the last worldview, I'm just going to quickly skim it over. It's the power-fear worldview, and the drivers here are to enhance power and avoid fear. So people with a strong power-fear worldview focus on assessing and navigating every situation and adjust their behavior to increase their position of power and influence, or their group's power and influence. This worldview looks a little bit scary, but it is present in every culture and every society. So anywhere that there's a hierarchy, there are power and fear dimensions to that. So, I mean, it's in organizations and corporate structures, it's in educational institutes, it's in military, it's in families. But societies that are based on power-fear worldviews are usually led by very strong authority figures with a major hierarchy. The scary part of the power-fear worldview thing comes from the fact that it has the most obvious abuse mechanism, and that is the abuse of power. So, for example, vicious dictatorships. But we have to remember that more often than not, the power-fear relationship is an empowering one, which we can see in the picture with the teacher-student kind of relationship. That's a very empowering one, benevolent one, or the parent-child relationship. So the idea is to focus on the empowering part of this kind of worldview. Right, so accepted behavior in a power-fear culture is determined by the people with power. So they're the ones that make the rules, the people who have the power, and they can change them at any time or break them at any time without any consequences. So people in these cultures tend to be aware of the power structure and try to align themselves to those with the most power in order to, enhance their own power or their group's power. In this worldview, there's two types of communication. The indirect communication for those above to respect the authority of people above with more power, and direct communication more with people holding less power. And as in the honor-shame cultures, verbal commitments are more important than written ones in the power-fear kind of societies. So as far as misunderstandings go, particularly for you in a business context, misunderstandings really between cultures really stem from not understanding the priorities that each group has. In fact, not even understanding where your own priorities are from, and definitely not understanding the priorities of the other group. So innocence guilt cultures, their orientation is that they see what is honorable is whatever follows the letter and the spirit of the law. And they find it really hard to understand the diverse range of things that can be considered honorable in other cultures, aligning with power or, loyalty to the group. And their driver to prioritize being right above the honor of the other individual can often bring shame to an honor-shame person. And in fact, IG cultures almost use this as a motivator, completely misunderstanding that it's definitely a demotivator to somebody from an honor-shame culture. So why bother knowing about these three worldviews? What good does it do us to know about these things? Well, what we don't need is a list of do's and don'ts when we try to interact with other cultures. Of course, it's really good to get to know things like how to pass your business card properly, how to do proper greetings. These are good things to know. But business flops are not usually caused by the surface level gaffes like this. Improper handshakes. These things are not major. It's more the deep down cultural differences that are likely to cause confusion, frustration, irritation over time as you move through business with somebody from a different cultural driver. So it's really important to understand these deep down cultural drivers so that you can assess the situation. So the three colors of worldview are a really useful starting point for learning how to analyze intercultural situations. They're easy to remember, and they provide an easy and flexible framework instead of memorizing a bunch of do's and don'ts for each different country that you're dealing with. It is a much more flexible framework that you can use to understand what's going on in intercultural encounters. So we say in ICI, Intercultural Intelligence, that in order to communicate effectively in a cross-cultural situation, you need to first know what mix of lenses that you have on. So you have to be aware of the way that you see the world and how this affects your interpretations of the situation and the lens that you bring to the table. And that helps avoid misunderstandings due to your own cultural lens. And then the next thing is to use the framework to evaluate the lenses of the other people that you're communicating with. And once you have analyzed that, you can use these to navigate the intercultural terrain that you're in and adapt and create an inclusive third cultural space. A third cultural space is where all of the worldviews are respected and upheld. So how do we do that? What does the third cultural space look like? So this diagram shows the third cultural space, and high-performing teams and organizations create a culture where all the cultural preferences and drivers are enabled. All of the positive things are brought into that third cultural space and included so that people from different worldviews have a comfort and a motivator to be there. So the point of communication, especially in business transactions, is to trigger the right response, right? So we have a much better chance of doing this if we can see and work with the motivators from the different worldviews at the table. So as we can see in the diagram, depending on the context, we need to create a space where IG people can do the right thing, where honor-shame people have a chance to enhance and grow their honor, and where power-fear people feel empowered and not threatened. So this becomes a powerful tool for interaction. So first we do our cultural self-analysis, figure out who am I, then we focus on discovering and understanding the personal culture of the person who we are dealing with, the person in front of us. And then we ask, how can we create this cultural space together that will allow us all to connect and to succeed in what we're intending to do? So with this attitude, our focus is calibrated to being an intercultural learner in every interaction. It gives us agility depending on who comes to the table. It's simple and easy to remember, and yet it is such a powerful and efficient way to figure out who we are from a cultural perspective and use this knowledge to engage with each other more effectively, to avoid misunderstandings, and to build trust in this third cultural space. And really that is the definition of intercultural intelligence. So we call ICI the ability to create new cultural spaces, that third cultural space that we just looked at, and facilitate win-win solutions by anticipating. So anticipating by knowing what the world views are, correctly interpreting, knowing our own view and interpreting other people correctly, and adjusting to culturally defined behaviors of others. So trying to use your knowledge of the different worldviews to trigger the right response. Great, so thank you so much for going on this cultural learning journey with me today. This is a topic of lifelong learning. We've just been able to touch on the surface today, but I find this framework to be a really powerful tool in helping me navigate my own intercultural interactions, and I hope that you will find it useful in yours as well. I hope that the information has been practical for you and that you have some daily takeaways for your daily interactions and business experiences as well, and practices. So right now I'd love to open up to some questions, and I also posed a question to you at the beginning, or asked you to try to identify some characteristics. So I just wanted to ask you as well, have you been able to identify some of the cultural drivers that explain your own behaviors and the behaviors of intercultural interactions that you've had with others? So thank you so much. Let's open the floor to any questions and discussion.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Catherine. It was a wonderful presentation, and I was just thinking. I mean, this is just for my own curiosity's sake. I mean, there is a question also in a discussion box, and there are some of the students chatting on WhatsApp as well.
Okay.
Because of this situation of COVID-19, do you see that there are some shifts in these cultural constructs that we discussed? I mean, honor and shame and IG. So do you see that there is some kind of a shift in these constructs because of this current COVID-19 situation somewhere? Is something changing somewhere?
You know, Dr. Sharma, I think that the drivers and they always say that there's culture changes kind of on a daily basis, but they at the same time that it remains really, really stable. So I would say that, yeah, I mean, there's bound to be some changes because of the COVID-19 situation. I think, you know, COVID-19 can be a really a force that brings us together as well as shows us what our differences are. You know, the drivers tend to kind of remain stable, but maybe the ways that we are communicating with each other will be affected by solidarity because of the situation that we all find ourselves in, and you know, that we will communicate in ways that we are. One of the things that's happening actually as a cultural shift in IG societies with the younger generation is that it's shifting more from an IG or individualist oriented kind of culture and becoming more of an honor shame for the younger generation, and we're talking all around the world. The group is more important, and so I'm kind of seeing that could be a result from the COVID situation, that we all become a little bit more group oriented and try to think of how things affect the group, the world, instead of just the individualist kind of point of view.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So, Dr. KK Sharma, our Dean of Undergrad Programs, sir is also there in the talk, and sir has written that the culture can also evolve flexibly in pandemic situation and may respond to changing opportunities and demands. This is right, actually. KK sir, anything you want to contribute in this entire talk, please?
I think I believe that the cultural nuances do get affected. The question which you asked, in a pandemic-like situation, we are, unlike in the past, we are so well connected to the world that every day you are looking at each other countries, how people are responding. But some of the basic nuances of caring, looking after your people, immediate response to such situations, I think those factors will always be there. They are inbuilt into the culture, because culture is also defined by the values which we start learning from our childhood time. While I see that I like Hofstede's national cultures, ma'am has put into various perspectives, and we can see who fits in where. But I think it's much more complex than that. And with so many students here, the only thing I would want to add to Catherine's talk is that, like values, you've got to keep it flexible. Wherever you land, you got to learn that culture and adapt yourself if you want to survive and succeed. While we carry basic values from home, but I think the requirement is that immediately adapt to the values of that nation or that society where you want to settle down your work or study. Without that, I think you will remain misfit. If I am right, Professor Catherine, please do correct me if I am wrong in this.
Oh no, Dr. Kumar, you're very right. Our cultural values are formed by our upbringing. So, we have this core of our culture that it's quite stable and who we are. So, I like to use the analogy of the chameleon, where, the chameleon is always a chameleon. The DNA doesn't change, but you can change your colors depending on your environment. So, you always need to hold on to who you are culturally, but that when you find yourself in a different culture, that if you can change the colors, and adapt to that environment, that will really work well for you. It increases trust, and it increases everything, information sharing, success in relationships, everything like that. If you can, change your outward color, but yeah, you can't, you don't want to change your core, that's who you are culturally. And I think that being aware of these other cultural things can just really help you navigate and understand other people who are different from you, and help you learn different behaviors that are more appropriate for the situation. But yeah, you'll always be who you are. Your DNA doesn't change.
Oh, that's fantastic. This is wonderful. So probably what is changing is the communication because of a situation evolved now. Maybe there is a difference of the medium that we are using to communicate. I mean, because of that social distancing that when I started, I just pointed it out. We are more on telephone calls or on webinars, or distances are maintained, but still we are talking. So there is a change in that communication technique. Probably that may have some effect on our cultural things, but the values will remain intact because this is how we are brought up and this is how we'll go forward. Aina Narang is asking, Professor, that thank you, KK sir. Aina is asking, when there is so much difference in opinion, especially in context of cross-cultural differences, what do you think? Conflict management becomes a core element in such a situation?
In cross-cultural situations, yes. I'm not all that familiar with the business world, and conflict management and resolution and stuff are something that my knowledge as far as business practices go are not. I'm not informed that way. But I would say that in conflict management, because of intercultural conflict, that it definitely is all about creating understanding between cultures. Because I come from an IG culture. Sometimes I would. One example, just queuing. Okay, so when I got to the Middle East, it was a very different concept of queuing, and we were used to having to line up, and everybody had to take their turns, and there was this very rigid, okay, one by one. And so you get to the Middle East and it's mad chaos everywhere, but there's kind of organized chaos to it as well. It may be similar in India, probably, where there's these sort of unspoken rules, and I was there for 16 years, so I became very accustomed to this way of queuing. And when I came back to the Canadian culture, where it's all right, wrong thinking, I was in a queue here, and I was in Middle East mode, and somebody, it was a really long line, and somebody opened another area, so I immediately went there like I would in the Middle East. And man, everybody in that queue just started yelling at me about how I wasn't next, and I felt so much shame, and I was really and guilt, and I kind of muttered sorry and went back to my place, and then the next person went there. But it just really highlighted to me how as a person who was coming a little bit from an honor shame point of view, how the right wrong thinking can really make you feel shame. And I at the same time went, okay, I don't want to judge people for reacting like that, because from their point of view, if they see wrongdoing according to their rules, they should call it out. So you've got these misunderstandings, IG people that might use shame as a motivator, and the honor shame person really feeling very badly shamed because of that. So just the fact that you kind of are aware, okay, that person isn't actually being rude, or that person isn't trying to cause conflict. They just do not understand my way of thinking, and I don't understand theirs. I don't understand their behaviors because my orientations are different. So I think conflict management is really so much about understanding the other person, and that really makes it much easier for you to see them in light of their, they're doing the right thing according to their own culture, and trying to say, okay, let's honor that part about your culture and about my culture at the same time, so that, I adjust my behavior if you're different culturally, and you adjust yours in those ways, and then we have a basis for resolving conflict.
Okay, that's a great question. That's a great thing. Now there are Gurnoor Singh and Udesh Singh. I think they have a common question now. So there is a lot of traffic of international students. They are going from X country to Y country for for their studies abroad, and there is a lot of traffic, but due to this COVID-19, now that that movement has come to stop. There is no movement here. So Gurnoor and Udesh, they want to understand, and they want to understand your perspective on that. What do you want to say? That will it be more welcoming in the next 6 months or 1 year or next 2 years, that the countries will invite students from different other nations to come and take their study abroad programs? Will it be that welcoming even post-COVID? This is precisely the question.
Yeah. It's just so hard to predict, isn't it? I mean, this is a real watershed moment for international education. I think that, a lot of institutions, including Chitkara, they're really geared up, and they really, really see the value and the benefits of having international education, the exchange of cultures, the innovations that you get through these kind of cross-cultural collaborations. It's just giving students and universities, they benefit so much from these situations. So, it's hard to predict how it's going to go as far as the restrictions and border closures and things like that go. I mean, we need to keep our communities safe. Until it's safe, then I know that there'll be a problem with mobility. But this situation also has its potentials for international education. Chitkara's so progressive, and you are already engaging in these kind of internationalization initiatives by getting people to collaborate online, and I can see that happening a lot more. I know that where we are, that at Georgian College, we're doing all remote delivery for the summer, and we're trying to do a blend in the fall, where it's going to be, if it's a course that can be done online, yes. But there's a lot of courses that have practical elements that you need to be on site and hands-on stuff. So we'll be trying to run those courses for students, but trying also to be able to provide enough space for people to maintain some physical distancing. The idea of international education, it really does have bearing on financial resources of individuals. So I see that this is a watershed moment for rethinking how to create opportunities that are more equal, that you don't have to have the kind of resources that it requires to physically go from one country to another, set yourself up for living in another place, pay tuition costs that are costly. So, there are potentials for making different inroads, and possibly more inroads that are more equitable for all students, no matter what their financial resources are. So, yeah, it's going to change. It'll probably change forever, but hopefully in directions that are more inclusive of everybody, just by rethinking how we deliver international education.
That's it. Thank you very much. Any other question, dear participants? Anyone has any query, any points that we can ask? We have already taken a lot of time of Professor Catherine, so
my pleasure.
Thank you. I think there is no question, no query. So would like to say thank you very much, Professor Catherine, for a wonderful session on intercultural management. On behalf of Chitkara Business School, faculty, students of MBA, BBA, BCom, everybody, we would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to you for sparing time and delivering a wonderful presentation on intercultural management. Our colleagues, Dr. Shivani Chopra, Dr. Kumar, Dr. KK Sharma sir, Dr. Shuchi, Dr. Rira, students, Shaolin, everybody is thanking you for for such a wonderful interaction, and we look forward to your continued support and mentoring, and probably we'll meet soon once again on the topic of intercultural management, maybe with more dimensions and the drivers next time. And I'm very sure that you also must have enjoyed the session.
Thank you. I absolutely love this session. Your online hospitality is as wonderful as your in-person hospitality. When I come to Chitkara, I see so many names popping up that I recognize from my visits there. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to speak with you. And yeah, I mean, there's so much more to dig down into this topic. I'd be delighted to explore those things. And thank you so much for the opportunity to connect with you today.
So thank you very much. Thanks all the participants, all the faculty members, and thank you, Professor Catherine, for joining us today. With this, we would like to close the session. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everybody. Have a great
Bye-bye,
evening.
and please stay safe.
Oh, yes, and you stay safe. Thank you so much. Stay healthy. Bye-bye.